We have been in Arizona for a year, so we're now doing a roundup of how things went. Before we travelled, we compiled a list of things that we wanted out of our new life in the United States. So what we're going to do is just quickly go through that list and see what did and didn't work out.
So first we're going to do things that we wanted and we got.
Space. Not the fine fancy. That was a joke. In England, we lived in a one-bedroom flat. It was about 400 square feet. We had a little bit of furniture, but not that much, but it was very difficult to get around. The place we lived in particular, Brighton, in the southeast, was quite expensive, so space was at a premium. We had lots of clever storage solutions, hanging things off walls, and everything was a bit awkward.
So something that's very different in most of the US, in particular in Arizona, space has been much easier to come by. We have a place here that is about 3 times the space for a similar price. That has been completely solved. We haven't had to rethink furniture every few months. We definitely aren't down to the final configuration possible for our furniture in this apartment. So that's been very good.
Yes. So next point, new as possible. In the UK, we lived in a building that was probably older than, I think, pretty much everything in this state, apart from maybe some cave paintings. Even though Victorian or pre-Victorian architecture looks nice, it has some disadvantages in terms of functionality. What we wanted was to try to find something that was basically the opposite, a living space that had been designed during a time where things like telephones and electricity were common, rather than a building that was designed at a time where piped gas was an emerging technology. I think we've got that. This place was built, how long ago was it?
This property is 12 years old and it was renovated this year in terms of the shared facilities, and the apartments were all repainted.
So that means that there are lots of power points around the wall, so there's no problem plugging in any electronic device. That was a problem in Britain. I had to run all sorts of cables around the place. The rooms are well proportioned. The insulation in terms of heat and sound are very good. I think we both appreciate that.
Something else that's nice with it being newer is I find it much easier to keep clean, because I think the older something is, the more it's sort of technically turning to dust. I can see why the show Doctor Who came up with a plot line about cracks in the wall, because basically cracks in the wall emerged during the process of a building gnarling into those medieval houses that you occasionally see in the UK and other parts of Europe. And I think the place that we lived in was about midway through its gnarling, and I'm happy that this place isn't anywhere near that.
So what's next?
Outside space.
In Britain, we had no outside space. We were on the first floor, or as they say here, the second floor, in a flat, or as they say here, apartment. And actually, no, they do say flat.
If they want to make it sound fancy here, it's a flat. If they want to make it sound fancy there, it's an apartment.
So we had no outside space apart from occasional use of a small shed. It meant that you'd have to keep everything indoors. Everything you owned had to be indoors. So you'd have a bike or painting stuff. It meant that nothing could just be left outside. We didn't have a garden, so if we wanted to spend time outdoors, we would have to go to a park, to the beach, and I do miss that. Whereas here, we have this nice patio that we're on, and we also have shared facilities such as a swimming pool and a gym and some lawns and areas that are, even though they're shared in a private community and feel pretty much like having your own sort of back garden. That's really nice.
I like that they're not actually our back garden, because it means someone else maintains it. We don't have to clean the pool, we don't have to mow the lawn, someone else does all of those things, and I like that.
Flat. Brighton was very hilly. This is very good in terms of getting lots of exercise, but if you're starting out cycling, it can be a bit off-putting because you cycle very, very quickly down a hill and then very, very slowly up a hill. Here, we've got some bikes. We ride around on them, and going to and from somewhere is pretty much the same experience. So it's quite nice that the area's flat.
One thing we very much wanted was for it to be more affordable than the UK. Now, not all of Britain, but in particular the southeast, which is where most of the jobs are, is very expensive. There's 20% sales tax. It's quite crowded in many of the cities like Brighton and of course London. So it's been much easier to afford somewhere to live, which is why we live somewhere bigger. And because there isn't 20% sales tax, almost everything else that we've bought has been cheaper, except for I think healthcare.
Yeah.
Healthcare is a downside. Healthcare is a lot more complicated and a lot more personally expensive. But everything else, going to the supermarket, going to buy clothes is much cheaper. If anything, when we lived in Britain, we would buy most of our clothes for the year when we visited my parents in Wisconsin because it was horrifically overpriced there comparatively.
So something else we put down is we wanted to be near things. So shops, cinema, restaurants, bars, all that kind of stuff. In Britain, we really were very, very close. We were in walking distance of basically everything. So we knew that it would be quite hard to do that in the US because it's big and there's zoning. But I think we've mainly got that. We're about as close to the shopping centre and other facilities in Chandler as we could reasonably expect. But I think we're about probably a mile away and we can cycle there. It's not that difficult to get around.
Another point is that we wanted to be somewhere low crime, obviously. Now, Chandler was named by a website whose link is above the 10th safest city over 20,000 people this year. So we have very low crime, particularly low violent crime. We've definitely got that. I feel safe here.
Airport. In Britain, we live near two international airports, Heathrow and Gatwick. We wanted a similar thing so that it wouldn't be too much of a pain for family and friends to visit. And we've got that. There's flights every day from Phoenix, Sky Harbour to London. They're increasing that during the week. I think that's pretty good. In terms of your parents, they have to do 2 trips, but it's still doable.
The Cross Airport, you should do a direct flight to Phoenix. We'd like that.
Right, moving on to things we wanted but weren't needed. So basically, things that didn't turn out to be that important. The first point is house. I wanted a house, I think because having a flat with no outdoor space made me think that the answer to that was having a house with outdoor space. But it turns out that living in an apartment community is like having a flat with outdoor space that you don't have to look after. So that is good. Point 2.
Another thing that we wanted is we thought that we wanted taxis. I suppose in a sense we have them, in the sense that we have Uber. But the reason that this doesn't really matter to us is because we like where we live more than we did in Brighton. We have a lot more both indoor and outdoor space. So basically, we haven't been to a pub or the equivalent bar in Chandler yet. Because we just haven't wanted to go. I mean, this patio is a much nicer place to have a drink or go eat a meal than any bar or restaurant that we have yet to go to. So, yeah, we don't need it anymore. But we've used Uber a little bit when Chris's parents were here, since they understandably didn't want to drive on the other side of the road, and it worked very well. So I think if we ever do decide that we need to find a pub, we're good to go.
Bath. In Britain, we have Bath. In the US, as far as I can see, from just every house and hotel, everywhere that we've stayed and visited, baths here are tiny, shallow, glorified shower troughs that are not really that relaxing. It's one of the few things that's smaller. Not everything's bigger in America. Whereas in Britain, if you have a bath, it'll be a big thing that's a small pool, big Victorian bath type thing. But they're much deeper. I missed that, especially on the road. But it turns out that having a hot tub or jacuzzi a stone's throw from the apartment, we can go there and have a swim, have a shower and come back. That sort of hits the nice feeling of having a hot bath.
I think arguably it's a bit better because I've never owned a bathtub with jets before.
No, that's true.
That's good.